Okay, so maybe somebody you know is suddenly pulling away in a relationship, and you can't tell, is this happening because they're disinterested, or is this happening because this tends to be a theme and pattern for them in their love life, friendships, even family relationships? And do you ever wonder, maybe this is an attachment style thing? Or perhaps you're watching this thinking that this might even be you. Well, in today's video, we are going to unpack the key similarities and differences between the dismissive avoidant attachment style and the fearful avoidant attachment style, because there are really important differences and really important similarities. And if you don't understand these key similarities and differences, you may find yourself in a situation where you are sabotaging relationships, either with this person or because this might even be your own attachment style. If you're not familiar with what attachment styles are, this is a body of work and research that started out of Cambridge University literally decades ago. And there are 4 attachment styles. You can think of them as basically being your love styles. I'll put a little infographic here of the 4 attachment styles at a very high level, but we're going to unpack the real nuances here in this video now so that you can understand what your attachment patterns might be and even where these things come from. So first and foremost, the dismissive avoidant. The dismissive avoidant attachment style is an insecure attachment style. And that means they basically have dysfunctional patterns and challenges in a relationship. If you're trying to recognize a dismissive avoidant attachment style off the cuff or more immediately, some really key nuances will be things like they are logical, they are rational, they may be a little slower moving when it comes to making decisions, and they definitely don't like being put on the spot. They can be distant or slower to warm up at times, and they tend to be grounded, practical, and guarded. You'll generally see that they tend to be slower moving in a relationship and are often disconnected from their own emotions. If you ask them what you feel, what do you feel, what's going on inside of you, they may give sort of deflective or ambiguous answers. Their big fears in relationship dynamics are that they tend to hate criticism. They take it really to heart. They essentially take criticism and they make it mean like something's wrong with me. I'm defective at my core, in a sense. And they experience a lot of shame around criticism as well. But because they're so stoic, you won't often know it. And if you are perhaps a dismissive avoidant yourself, you may come into the realization that you are stoic. People don't often read you very well. But in fact, yeah, criticism really hits you, maybe more than it tends to hit the average person. They also really don't like feeling emotionally unsafe. They easily feel trapped or afraid of being trapped in relationships. They can fear commitment, and they can sort of keep people at arm's length. They may even go to great lengths to keep their privacy or distance, and maybe individuals that don't want to dive right into introducing their romantic partners to friends and family. You may even see in certain cases or circumstances that they go years without introducing their family to a potential partner. Dismissive avoidants often fear being weak if they are too open or emotional. They have this kind of deep underlying feeling of not being good enough a lot of the time, but they won't really show it. And they don't like to rely on other people. They fear that that would make them helpless or powerless. And deep down, dismissive avoidants really want a few key things in relationships. They want their autonomy, their independence, their freedom. They also, believe it or not, actually thrive quite well when they feel like people are appreciating and acknowledging them, especially in small and sincere ways. They deeply, though they won't let you know it, want acceptance. They want understanding and they want support in the relationships around them. And they really value and care about relationships that bring harmony, peace, and certainty, stability, and safety. If those things feel threatened, especially the stability and safety pieces, they may sabotage relationships as a whole or suddenly up and leave. The relationship to their boundaries is very interesting. They tend to set more extreme boundaries than other attachment styles. As an example, if they are feeling exhausted for your Friday night evening date plans that you have, rather than saying, hey, I'm tired, can we just stay in or take it easy? They may do things like cancel the date altogether, leaving you to feel confused. And sometimes they'll do so without explanation, because they often don't feel like they really owe an explanation to anybody else. In fact, due to the way that relationships were modeled to them in childhood, they often feel like relationships are basically about them meeting all of their own needs, you meeting all of your own needs, and every so often coming together for a little bit of mutual benefit and connection. But they don't like to feel like they are relied on or that they have to rely on somebody else. In fact, this is something known as counterdependence. They may even go to great lengths to avoid these feelings of having to be relied on or relying on someone. Some of their big, maybe unhealthy expectations in relationships are thinking that people should always be understanding when they need space, that conflict and arguments should never really be occurring, and that they shouldn't have to make compromises in their relationship dynamics. They also feel like they aren't responsible for their partner's feelings, and they feel this way in pretty intense extremes. In other words, if you bring your feelings to them, they might sort of be like, hey, that's yours to deal with and you can come back later. Instead of having this healthy middle ground where they will try to support you and be there for you, while also not taking too much responsibility for your emotions. That's healthy interdependence. But again, they move more towards this counter-dependent space of like, whoa, those are yours to deal with, not mine. And they often feel like they need to find their perfect match in a relationship to avoid any type of conflict. Now, they are this way for a reason. They also have a few other important coping mechanisms I want to share with you when it comes to when they are triggered. They may stonewall. They may withdraw to decompress for extensive, at times, periods of time. They may be passive aggressive, ignore, or dismiss behaviors, and they may really have a lot of coping mechanisms centered around numbing, deflecting, or avoiding through creature comforts and distractions. Things, for example, like binge watching television, playing hours and hours of video games, drinking too often alone, binge eating food all the time in their own company, these types of patterns of behavior. Now, there's a reason they are like this. And then I'll tell you some of the differences, by the way, between them and fearful avoidance, because this can really shape how you see yourself if you think you may be one of these attachment styles and give you key indicators of what healing needs to take place. But it can also help you so much if this is a partner or loved one of yours, so you don't personalize their behavior. You understand how to better communicate with them. Dismissive avoidant attachment style often forms because of childhood emotional neglect. If you had parents who couldn't be attuned to you because they were going through their own things too much, and they weren't really present and connected to your emotions, and they didn't have what we call approach-oriented behaviors in psychology, meaning that when you were in distress, they came towards you. They tried to check in with you and see what was going on and try to help you co-regulate by changing their behaviors to soothe you. Things like maybe cuddling you or making sure that you were eating on time. If there was an absence of a lot of these things, then it can form a dismissive avoidant attachment style because of CEN, or childhood emotional neglect. Now, sometimes people will say dismissive avoidant attachment style also forms through enmeshment in childhood. And yes, that can be another causal factor, but enmeshment usually means the child is enmeshed with the parent or caregiver's emotions, and yet that caregiver isn't attuned and present enough with them, indicating that there are still these underlying patterns of CEN, or childhood emotional neglect, taking place. In fact, that overarching theme of neglect tends to be the primary factor in dismissive avoidant attachment styles. And even if there was chaos or other things happening, if neglect was the key theme in your childhood, very, very strong chance that to this day, you may still be a dismissive avoidant attachment style, unless, of course, you've been doing the work. So, what are the differences between them and a fearful avoidant attachment style? Well, they present very differently, although people often get them mixed up. And in case you missed it, you can now reserve your spot and get more than a 50% early bird discount for our live relationship coach certification program. Launching October 28th, 2024, this 12-week program gives you the opportunity to build a new career, create your own thriving coaching practice, help your community, and secure your financial future full of abundance with a growing waitlist of clients. And the best part is that you get to spend a whole bunch of time with me as I teach you exclusive subconscious reprogramming tools and help you learn how to change somebody's attachment style from insecurely attached to securely attached, so that you can truly help create transformation in people's lives and have a wait list of people waiting to work with you. We also have an entire business week about how to build funnels, systems, and to really build a thriving and busy practice. You can sign up using the link down below the video, and I can't wait to see you there. Fearful avoidant attachment styles, when you first meet them, they tend to be very present. They make you feel really seen. They really connect to you. You can almost feel their deep, insatiable curiosity about who you are and what makes you tick. And they tend to be quite charming. likable and generous in relationships, even early on, generous with their emotional energy, their time, their thoughtfulness. And they also tend to be very hypervigilant. What I mean by hypervigilant, if you're not familiar with this term, is they read between the lines about everything. Dismissive avoidance may be a little bit less attuned to you, kind of doing their own thing, not picking up on cues and signals, whereas fearful avoidance read every single time there's a little shift or change in any kind of pattern. They tend to also be intense. And as you get to know them a little more, you may see bouts or periods of them being hot and cold. Again, this is a key differentiator between them and a dismissive avoidant. Dismissive avoidants are slower to warm up. They're a little standoffish. They're kind of withdrawn from the beginning, whereas fearful avoidants can feel like the warmest, most intense people that you've met. And they're really there, really present in extremes. And then they can suddenly pull back. And that tends to happen the most when you're not with them. It's almost like they're very present with people in front of them, but then withdrawn when they're not in somebody's company. That old adage, out of sight, out of mind, could sort of apply here. Fearful avoidants as well tend to be a little bit suspicious. They may not let on to that at the beginning, but they struggle to trust more than you may think. Their big fears in relationships are things like, I will be betrayed. I will be abandoned. I will be seen as unworthy or bad. I will be helpless or powerless or out of control. They really don't like feeling like that. And they may feel like they are unloved. So, what you will see in terms of the major emotional patterns of a fearful avoidant is where the dismissive avoidant is kind of withdrawn and quite grounded and not very expressive of their emotions. Fearful avoidant attachment styles tend to be very expressive. They may go for periods of time being kind of withdrawn and not as emotionally expressive, but then you will see those emotions come out. They feel deeply and intensely. They tend to experience emotions the most when they're triggered of things like hurt and anger. They may express volatile behaviors in relationships and put a lot of pressure on themselves in all of their relationship interactions. Big things they tend to deeply be seeking in relationships are things like emotional depth, passion, the ability for somebody else to be present and make them feel seen and heard. They love novelty and discovery and growth, but they also love intimacy and depth of connection as much as they love what seems to be in direct competition with this, being the need for independence and freedom. A lot of people will often think of fearful avoidance as kind of these walking contradictions. On one hand, they need all of the depth and closeness and intimacy and want to be seen and heard and have you be present. But on the other hand, you better make sure that you're not trying to control them and that you're honoring their freedom, their independence, their ability to really be themselves and make their own decisions. Their relationship to boundaries is often unique as well. Fearful avoidant attachment styles, when it comes to their boundaries, are kind of going through extremes. This, again, is a big key theme in their personality a lot of the time. But with their boundaries specifically, you may see that they have almost no boundaries until they get triggered and feel taken advantage of. And then they have really extreme boundaries. I often call this the fearful avoidant boundary cycle. They overgive and underreceive, and they're so generous, basically because a lot of the time they're trying to earn their worth. And then they hit this critical threshold or tipping point where they get frustrated. And all of a sudden they're like, I've had enough. They set extreme boundaries from a place of anger or volatility. They may have a bit of an emotional outburst, like a sudden intense criticism, or even things like raising their voice, and then they feel guilty about it. And soon after that, they go back to overgiving and under receiving as a means to relieve their own feelings of guilt. And this cycle can go around and around for very long periods of time. Some of their unhealthy expectations in relationships are things like nobody should ever, ever break my trust, no lying, no white lying at all. And while it's important to value honesty in a relationship, fearful avoidants may take this a little bit more to the extreme. They also feel like their partner should make them feel wanted, should be very faithful in emotion, thought, should never really find anybody else attractive. That can be a dynamic in fearful avoidant attachment style because they can be a little bit on the side of possessiveness. But interestingly enough, if you're a fearful avoidant, you may not show it. You may feel those things internally, suppress them, stuff them down, never talk about it, and try to sort of exhibit yourself as the never jealous partner. But you'll see some of these patterns come out in your coping mechanisms. Things like testing, spitefulness, criticism, sudden pushing away of somebody if you feel like they are too close, or emotional volatility. You may find that if you or a loved one is fearful avoidant, there are these exaggerated responses of over defensiveness, AKA your fight response, fleeing all of a sudden in a conflict or disagreement, AKA flight response, freezing for long periods of time, things like your mind is running a million miles an hour, but you don't find yourself moving or taking action towards anything. Symptoms of freeze response, or fawning, people pleasing excessively until you get frustrated and fed up enough, and then you set really extreme boundaries as a result. The last thing is you may find that you actually have some creature comforts in here. And I want to tell you something that is really important. And this is something that people do not talk about nearly enough when it comes to attachment styles. Just because you have an attachment style doesn't mean it always has to be that way. I myself was a fearful avoidant attachment style. I've become securely attached and have been this way for a very long time, about a decade now. And this is something that's achievable for everybody. I am not special in that regard. In fact, we've had over 40,000 people come through our programs and become a secure attachment style from an insecure attachment style. So if you feel like this is running your life or sabotaging your relationships and you don't want to feel like this, or if you think this is a loved one in your life and you want to better understand them, you could actually check out fully for free for a limited time our attachment style healing programs. We have a 90-day push to become securely attached through these programs, and I will put a link to check this out fully for free just for a limited time down below. Whether you are fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant, anxious attachment style, or even if you're secure and you just better want to understand these individuals in your life, I'll put links to all of those things down below. And I hope that today's video helped you make more sense of this if you're new to this topic, because every single person has an attachment style. It can make such a huge impact on our relationships. I often use the analogy that your attachment style is a subconscious set of rules that you have about love. So if you imagine that you sit down to play a board game with somebody and they have the rules for Monopoly and you have the rules for Scrabble, you're going to find this awfully confusing. And if you learn what those rules are and you understand how to communicate about them, you can actually enjoy being together. But if you don't, and you just have different rules and expectations and needs and ideas about how we're supposed to communicate when it comes to love and connection, then it can create a lot of chaos. So I hope this has been educational for you. I hope you enjoyed this. And I can't wait to see you in the next video. I'm hoping that you subscribe and stick around. Thank you for watching.